Hello there. It is time to get started with some seed starting for this upcoming year. So it's January. And I will say there are not a lot of seeds in my area that we need to start at this time, but there are a couple. So hang on a second. Let me get this camera turned around. All right. So first off, real quick, seed organization. I have a little bit of a problem buying lots of seeds when I see things that look interesting. So I have quite a collection of seeds. It was getting to be too much to just keep track of in a couple of little cardboard boxes. So a couple years ago, I bought some of these things from Michael's that are meant for photo storage. And then each one of the little smaller compartments is either a type of seed. These are all of my flower types of seeds. These are all my vegetable garden seeds, which includes a few flowers. Actually, I have that backwards. These are the vegetable garden. These are the flower garden. But I do have a few flowers that I keep in here that basically are really only for the garden, like things like marigolds and nasturtiums. So anyways, each one is a type of plant or vegetable, or in the flower one, I have them arranged kind of by when you would start them, either inside or outside, in order of earliest time of year. So what are we starting in the central part of Ohio in January? So first off, for the vegetable garden, onions. And I like to grow a lot of different kinds of onions. So you can see here, I went through my garden planner that I have online and marked down about how many of each of the different kinds of onions that I'm going to want to grow this year. And then I took my garden marker and some seed tags, and I've made a tag for each 6-section tray that I'm going to use for starting seeds, and I'll show you those in a few minutes here when we get out to actually starting. But one thing I will say is you do want to use garden markers when you're making tags that will go outside, because this won't fade in the sun. Sharpie markers absolutely will fade and or come off, and this will not. So this will last all through the season, so you can know what's what in your garden or in your seed trays. So I will mark a tag in each of the seed trays with what type of seed that is, and then I have just kind of pulled out of my onion collection and put in here what I'm going to actually plant, and then did the same thing with the other two kinds of seeds we're going to be starting today, and that is violas. And I have a variety of different kinds of violas. Violas are really sweet little early spring flowers. I like to start them now so that some of them may even develop buds or flowers before I plant them outside in the early spring. They can handle some cold weather. And so these are things that I like to put in my pots on the porch or by my back door, and to have some pretty spring flowers very early. And then the other thing is, I don't have any of these right now, but annual geraniums. So those are something that I like to also start a little bit early in the middle of the winter so that they are pretty substantial looking plants, maybe even developing some flower buds by the time we would plant them outside in early to mid-May. So that is the other flower that we'll be getting started. And just real quick while we're here, I know this is maybe not the best. Oh, sorry, I was rechecking what some of my seeds look like. That didn't have pictures on the packages, but this is a website called Seed Time. I love this. Now, what you're seeing here is as a layout is something that is not available in the free version, I don't think, but you can get some reasonable levels that would allow you to have the layout. This to me is my favorite part, but even the free version is very valuable. It has a, let me go back to a calendar. And what I love about this calendar is, hang on a second, it's processing. The free version has lots of things that are awesome. The paid versions, and there's different levels, allow you to also create a layout of your garden, so you can just see exactly how much you can fit of different things. That's actually my favorite part. But even with the free version, as you can see here on their demonstration, you plug in different crops that you want to grow, and it tells you things like when to start the seeds or when to plant them outside if you're direct seeding. It then also can tell you lots of other information. You can see when to do different things like fertilize or take care of or harvest, so that you can have an idea of when different things are going to be available. So it's called Seed Time. I will try to put a link in the description of this video if it's something you're interested in checking out. I personally love it. Again, my favorite part is the layout that you saw a minute ago, because it lays things out to scale, meaning if something needs to be 6 inches apart, you can see exactly how much space in your garden plot that's going to take, and then how many you can grow, and then how many, if you're starting your own seeds, how many seeds to start. So we'll be back together in just a minute once we get out in the garage and get ready to start these seeds. Well, we're getting ready to start our onions, and I wanted just to give you guys a little bit of education about onions. This is a catalog from Johnny's Selected Seeds. They are a really good source for seeds. One thing I will say, they tend to not have any like free shipping offers unless you're buying a lot. So just keep that in mind, but they do have very high quality seeds. There are some things that they have that you can get other places. I also like M.I. Gardner and Baker Creek. But one of the things about onions to know is that they are what is called a biennial, meaning that they have a 2-year life cycle, which means the first year, if you start them from seed, they are focused on growing an onion. But then the next year, you can see here, I have a bunch of onions that started to sprout before I got a chance to eat them or process them in some kind of way. They're growing a new plant. These onions' goal, their life goal, is to grow flowers that would then produce seeds. So if you are buying onion sets, little onions, it could be that that's a second year of that life cycle, and you may not get very big onions. Starting them from seed gives you the best chance for a larger onion if that's what you're going for. The other thing to know about onions is that they are affected by how much sunlight there is in a day. And so depending on where you live, what latitude, you want to make sure you are growing the right kind of day length onions. So here's a map in this seed catalog. If you live in these different ranges, so if you live, I live up here in a long day area, we have long summer days. So I need to try to focus on onions that need a long day, like 14 hours, to trigger it to start forming its bulb. It's the onion, the part that I want to eat. Whereas if you live down in this area, you need to have onions that will trigger bulbing with less sunlight. Otherwise, you are not going to get a very big onion because it's never going to get enough sunlight to trigger telling it it's time to make an onion. So as you are looking for onion varieties, look for ones and look for companies that give you that information, or do your research. Just to give you one last piece of information for us, where I'm at here in Central Ohio, I like and have found good results with Patterson. They also store really well. And for red onions, I have had good luck with the Red Ring and Cabernet, and then another variety, I think actually Monastrell too, another variety that I don't think they have pictured here, and I don't know if Johnny's has, which is Ruby Red. And I think I got those from M.I. Gardner. So just a little education about onions before we get started planting. So we're just learning some more things about onions. There are red kinds, there are yellow kinds, there are green onion kinds. And one of the things about green onions that's kind of neat is that you can do something called succession planting. And what that means is we're going to start some green onion seeds now here in January, and we'll have those to plant out in the early spring. But then once you plant those out in the garden, you could then plant seeds in the garden so that when those first round of green onions are done, you have some other ones that are a few weeks behind. And so once you've used up those green onions that you started from seed in January, now you have some green onions that have been growing in the spring out just in the garden that you put out as what we would call direct seeds. So you didn't start them inside. You let them just be seeds that you planted in the garden. And green onions are something that you can do that with probably several times as a succession. So that's succession planting. All right, we're getting ready to start. So here's what you need. Basic supplies. You need some kind of seed starting soil mix. I am a little bit bougie. I like Espoma because it's all organic. I trust what's in there and what's not in there. But the main thing with seed starting mix is you need it to be light and fluffy. Let me turn the camera. You need it to be light and fluffy. So it's going to have a lot of, if it's a good quality mix, you should see a lot of like those little white flecks. That is vermiculite. Vermiculite is actually a volcanic rock, I think I'm saying that right, that's been kind of ground up. So it looks like little bits of styrofoam, but it's not. It's actually a volcanic rock that's been chunked up. But you can see how light and fluffy. There's no big pieces. If you've got a seed starting mix that has big chunks of dirt or big chunks of wood in it, it's not a very good quality mix. There are some people who say you can get regular potting mix and sift it to take out the bigger chunks and make your own seed starting mix. It might be more cost effective to do that. I have never done that because it's just like an extra step to me. I'd rather pay a little bit extra to get a bag of seed starting mix. But the other thing is then I don't know what I'm going to do with those big chunks. Mm-hmm. So because, I guess you could put them in and have just a chunkier. If you grow anything like succulents or things that need drier soil, then that might be a good option for you because you can add those bigger chunks into your regular potting mix to make it be chunkier for plants that might need that. I don't grow anything like that, so I just buy the good stuff that I don't have to mess with. So then the next thing you want to do is we want to get this wet. We want to get this so wet. Not that it'll drip when I do this, but that it'll stay together. So we need to get some water. We're going to add that to this, and then we'll get this all dampened up enough to where it'll be kind of like I said, we want to be able to squeeze it like this. We don't want water dripping. We want it to hold together and not fall apart in our hand right away. And that's going to give the seeds the moisture they need until they germinate to be able to get going, and not be too much moisture that we have things rotting or getting funguses growing. And so let me get some water. We'll get this moistened up, and then we'll get started actually planting our seeds. Be back in a minute. Okay, so we're ready to start getting some water in here. I just have a bucket where I got water out of the spigot outside, and I have a little pitcher that is no longer used in the kitchen. And I just put in some water. You can always add more. At first, if it's been sitting like mine has for a while in the bag, it's going to be a little bit what's called hydrophobic, meaning kind of what it sounds like. It's afraid of water. It's going to take a little bit of effort to get this water to start being absorbed by the mix. This is not actually a soil, by the way. I may accidentally call it soil or dirt, but it's not. It's usually, depending on the company you buy your seed starter mix from, a combination of either coco coir or peat moss as the stuff that's the brown stuff. But you can see here as I keep working this, it's going to start working into, and the color is going to change. The mix is going to get darker as it starts to absorb water. And so we just kind of keep zhuzhing and squeezing and mixing until it starts to absorb the water. And so you can see here kind of a comparison. Here is some that is now, like that would be ready to use. It holds together. You can see this is darker a little bit than that. And so what we want to do is we want to get all of this to be like that. So we're just going to keep working it like this. I like to wear gloves because I'm a little precious that way. I don't like to get too dirty. I work with plants and dirt, but I don't like to get too dirty. So what I do is I have gloves that have a little bit of I don't know what that is, vinyl type coating just off of Amazon. These are Cool Job brand. You can get like a 3 or 4 or 5 pack for not very much. I go through gloves almost as quick sometimes as tissues. But anyways, I have a pair of gloves like this that'll get wet and yucky, and then I have a spare pair that I'll put on when it's time to do some things that I don't want my hands to be as wet. But the other thing that I started doing a couple years ago is putting on like gardening sleeves underneath, because that helps keep my hands, my arms warm enough in the cold garage because it's January in Ohio. And it protects my shirt sleeves from getting wet and yucky, because that feels weird. So anyways, we're going to keep working this. Once we get this worked, then we'll come back with you and show you getting it in the trays and putting in the seeds. Mix nicely dampened up. When we squeeze it, it holds together. You can see the color's nice and dark. So what we've done is I've just taken this and I've just scooped some in here. It's very, very fluffy at this point. So what we do is we kind of fill it up to the top of the seed tray, and I use these. You can fit, I like these for onions because the onions can live in this all the way until it's time to plant them. And we're going to put around 9 onion seeds per section. So one of these gets you 72 onion plants. And keep in mind, 1 plant equals 1 onion. So it's not like some things like a pepper plant where you get a lot of peppers from 1 plant. You get 1 onion per 1 plant. So this is very fluffy right now. We want it fluffy, but we don't want air pockets. So I'm just gently with my fingers tapping this down. You can see it takes it down about 1 centimeter. So it's still going to be loose enough for the onion seeds to grow their roots without having to push through something that's like a brick, but there won't be any air pockets. This also now gives us the 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch depth that we need. Once we put our seeds on here, then we're going to take some more of this and cover over top, and then our seeds will be at exactly the depth they need to be to grow. Every kind of seed has different depths that they should be planted at, and a good seed company will include that on their packet. So like these are from Outside Pride, and it says on the back right here, planting depth. Johnny's also has that on here somewhere, but their printing is really small, so you have to look a little closer. M.I. Gardner is another company I really like, and theirs is really easy to find. It's right here. I really actually think probably their seed packets, M.I. Gardner, are the easiest to read, especially if you're not used to gardening. Another company that I like, just since we're doing this, we'll talk about seed companies, is Botanical Interest. This is a type that you can find in a lot of garden centers now, and their packet also is pretty easy to find that information. This company also, if you open up the packet, has a whole lot more information on the inside. And then one other company that I like, but I don't have onion seeds from right now, is Baker Creek. And their website is rareseeds.com. So those are all really good companies, have really good seeds. But now we're ready to get started planting our seeds. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the seeds and you're just going to we're going to try to get 9 in here, and we don't have to be too fussy about it. We're just going to get 9 seeds kind of spaced out as best we can, and then we'll cover it over with some dirt. So let me do that with one that I'm pretty sure. And as you can see, these are seeds from a previous year. You most definitely can store seeds and use them from one year to the next. For most vegetables, those seeds, some seeds people have found that are years and years old and they still germinated. But you do have the chance that they won't germinate as much, like as many of them, like your rate may go down a little bit. So I actually, for my packets that are a little bit older, I may put more than 9 seeds. And then I just have extra onions to try to give away. But, so this is what the onion seeds look like. They kind of look like little baby mouse poops. But they're not. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't talk about food and poop at the same time. But you literally are just going to take these, and you can't really see them against the dirt. But I'm just trying to put like 3 rows of 3. I know you can't really see that. And again, I'm not worrying about being too precious, but that is those. And I'm going to I think I'm doing at least 3 cells of this kind. So the other thing you want to do that I like to do ahead of time is make some seed tags. And I talked about this when I was making this at the beginning of the video. You want to use an actual garden marker. You can get, okay. You want to use, you want to make your seed tags. I like to make them before I start putting my seeds in my things, because then my hands are messy and I don't want to be writing on these when I've got messy hands. So I'm making a whole pack of this variety that's a red type called Red Wing that stores pretty well. So I'm just going to put 1 tag in there for now. When I get ready to plant, I'll make a few more tags depending on how many different places I'm planting them. So again, I'm just going to try to put about 9 per section, sort of spacing them out. As you can see, I'm not being very precise because it doesn't really matter. Onions can grow together. Their roots can get all intertwined. When it comes time to planting them, they will separate very easily. I've made videos about that the last 2 years. If you want to go check them out on the channel, look for something that says something like planting onions. So they just come right apart and do it very easily, and they are not bothered at all by that. It does not impact them negatively in any way. So, and then this is where I go a little stupid and I add a few extra seeds just in case, and just throw those in there. And there we go. So then what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit more of this moistened up, dampened up seed starting mix on top. Now you can also get your little cells completely full and poke holes. If you want to be a little more precise about your seed placements, which is what I will do when it comes time to start the geranium seeds, those I'm going to want to be a little bit more precise so that, because they might be a little more bothered by being messed with their roots when I go to put them into bigger pots as they grow. So those I will probably just fill the seed cells up here and then poke a hole with my finger or the end. I usually use the end of the marker because it's metal. And then there we go. Then the last step before we put this in a big tray, these are called 10-20 trays, is, and it'll fit 6 of these, is, oh, and I actually don't want to do that. You don't want to get dirt in the bottom, because if a little water seeps down when you're watering later, you don't want stuff down here that's going to encourage fungus gnats to hatch or mold or other things like that. We're going to put a little bit of that vermiculite. Vermiculite is also a ground up rock of some kind. So perlite is what was in here, although probably also some vermiculite. But vermiculite is more of a yellowy color. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to sprinkle a little bit on top of each cell, and that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to help keep the moisture level stable while they're working on germinating. It's also, hopefully, although I haven't always found this to work out, yeah, last year I had fungus gnats that drove me crazy, but I also started a whole lot of seeds, is it should maybe tone down the fungus gnat population because they won't like landing on there and laying their eggs. So we're going to just cover that. Every seed tray gets that on top unless the seed packet specifically says not to do something like that, which is I haven't seen. So anyways, that's what then every tray is going to look like. It's got a label. It's got its soil. It's got its seeds. It's got its vermiculite. The other thing, just to let you know, I don't always do one whole pack of each thing. So there will be some of these packs that'll have 3 cells of one type and 3 cells of another. So, you know, make it work. You can also just do 1 cell if you don't have a very big garden and you want just a few onions. Just, you know, and you want a bunch of different kinds, do one of these and everything can be a different kind of onion if you want. One last thing about onions before we wrap this up is they are great at helping to inhibit certain kinds of things from getting into your garden. There's a lot of pests that don't like onions. Is it foolproof like having, a guard fence around your garden? No, but it will do some effort at repelling or inhibiting certain things from coming and hanging out in your garden and enjoying it as a snack because they don't like the smell. So I will sometimes start extra green onions in particular because they don't take up hardly any space, and just sprinkle them around in different places. Not only does it help with repelling like things that might eat, it also helps repel certain insects that could damage your plants. So they are something that is nice to use as a natural pest deterrent. There are other things. We'll talk about that in another video. So last thing that we'll do, and we'll come back when we're ready to do that, is we'll put a humidity dome over this. First we'll mist just a little bit of water to set that vermiculite. We'll put a humidity dome over top and get it under the lights. So we'll be back when we're ready for that. Now we're doing our viola seeds. Everything else is basically the same, couple of exceptions. We surface sow viola seeds. They are very, very small. So let me see if I can get the camera. So you see that little orange dot? Those two things right there, those are viola seeds. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sprinkle them on top of the soil and just spread them out. And again, kind of like the onions, we can put more than one per cell in something that's got cells this big, because these are not going to stay in this until it's time to plant outside. Now, I suppose you could put one seed per, and yes, that would probably make it all the way until time to plant. But because I like to have space be saved initially, what we're going to do instead is put several in here. When the plants get a little more established and are, have gotten at least 4 or 5 true leaves, we'll talk about true leaves on a little bit later with when we actually get some plants growing. But when they get 4 or 5 true leaves, then what we're going to do is we're going to pop this out of here, separate those plants, and put them in bigger pots with potting mix, which has more nutrition in it for the plants, and let them grow on in a bigger pot, one plant or a couple plants per, and in something that gives them more nutrients to help them grow and get bigger and stronger, and actually maybe get a little bloom on them before it's time to plant outside. So violas get surface sown, means they just sit on top. We will put a thin layer of vermiculite just to help with the soil moisture. But otherwise, these are now ready for that vermiculite coating and to go under the lights, under the humidity dome. So violas, done. Something I forgot to mention is, because when you have really, really tiny seeds, it's hard to pick them up. If you dampen your other finger, either touch the dirt or lick it, whatever you're comfortable with, and then touch the seed, it'll stick to your finger. And then you can just kind of sort of rub your fingers together and it'll fall off into the dirt. Or you can also, if you've got your dirt, is nice and stable, you can touch it to the dirt and it should stick to the dirt. So you just kind of touch it and then touch it and it should fall off into the dirt. And that is one way to kind of help when you've got little bitty seeds, to get them, if you're trying to place them and not just sprinkle. Which you can also sometimes do with little seeds like this, is just sprinkle them. And then when everything has germinated enough that you're ready to move it up into bigger pots, you can just pull it apart into little chunks, and you may have more than one plant in the bigger pots, but that's okay, especially with something like violas. Now we're doing our geraniums. So these are annual geraniums. In the past, the only place I could find annual geranium seeds was from Swallowtail Seeds, and you get a nice pack of 10, they say. Usually they had 11, sometimes 12. But this year, Johnny's now also has 3 kinds of seeds for geraniums that they're carrying. And one of them was one of my favorites, Apple Blossom, Maverick Apple Blossom. So what we're doing is we're putting 2 seeds per cell. And so we're kind of doing them diagonal like this to give them plenty of room to grow. These are also something that are not going to live in this until it's time to plant, because again, I want to save space when we're starting. So when these start to get some size on them and are stable enough to pot up, then this will get popped out, and then we'll turn this into 2 little bit bigger pots that then they can grow in till it's time to plant. If you want to, you could put 1 per, and they probably could be in this until it's time to plant with no problem. I just like to save some space on my racks at the beginning. All right, so that's our geraniums. Otherwise, same basic process. These only need to be 1/8 of an inch deep, so we're going to put just a very light sprinkling of the seed starting mix over top, and then vermiculite, and then we're going to put a humidity dome on here and get them under the lights. So one last step. We'll see you in a few minutes. Now we're putting on the vermiculite, and on the violas we're doing a very thin coating just to help with moisture. Everybody else is getting more of a like trying to kind of like, not like, you know, a cup of it on top, but just enough to sort of cover the surface to help manage the moisture in the potting mix to stay consistent, and also maybe help cut down on fungus gnats trying to do their business in there. All right, back in a minute to do the final last step. All right, the class is over. We got everything into their little trays, vermiculite sprinkled on top, put the humidity dome on, and now they have been sitting under these lights for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours. And you can see already we've got a nice, good bit of humidity built up. That's part of what's going to help keep things the right level of moisture for the soil. I really like this particular type of humidity dome because it has a little vent. So if it gets a little too steamy in there, I can turn these and it allows some of that to escape. But the lights are pretty close, and things should be in a place where they can do what they do, which is germinate and start to grow. Once they start to grow, those humidity domes, this humidity dome will come off, and then we'll just let them grow. And then that is really the point where you have to start watching to make sure that your soil doesn't dry out, and also obviously does not get too wet. You don't want to overwater. That can lead to problems. More on that some other time when we're actually looking at some seedlings. But for now, everybody's tucked in, and hopefully sometime over the next couple weeks, we will start to see some baby plants. Thanks for joining us here today in Aunt Susan's garden, my first seed starting class.